It's a good time magazine today. You should check it out. Trump's World, it's called. Good one. Well, good evening, everybody. It's Chris here from the Whistle Stop Cafe in Muir, Alberta. I know it's late. I've actually been trying to get on to do a bit of a chat for a little while, but I just keep getting busier and busier. But here I am, 10:04 on a Monday night, which is the perfect time anyway. Wouldn't you agree? I will let you know that in the coming week, I have a couple of guests joining me. I have Corey Morgan from the Western Standard joining me on Wednesday, I believe. And I have Jim McMurtry. He is the BC school teacher from Surrey who got fired for remarks about residential schools. And now Jim is traveling around the province speaking truth and getting tomatoes thrown at him for it. He's been traveling around with Frances Widdowson and Dallas Brody. Dallas is the leader of One BC, and she is making some huge gains in BC just by speaking the truth. So hopefully we'll be able to get Dallas on as well. But we have Corey and Jim lined up. We'll have Don Sharp on right away to talk about the situation with EMS in Alberta. And he's going to let us know why he posted what he did about the NDP and their fake virtue signaling supporting EMS under the guise of Sarah Hoffman actually caring, which maybe they do, maybe they don't. I don't think they do. Anyway, I'd appreciate it if you can't hear me, just put up a comment. If you have a question, put up a comment, but I'm going to get right to it. Alberta will never stop being screwed as long as we remain within Confederation. That's a fact. I wish it wasn't true, but it's a fact. There's no way around it. We're not going to get the things we need. We're certainly not going to get the things we want. The Constitution will not be opened and amended to fix the inequities between the East and West in this country. If the Constitution is opened, it would probably be even worse for us. We have a prime minister right now who wrote a book called Values, in which he describes a future where the ordinary person has to lose comforts and convenience for sustainability. And we all know what that means. You can't drive your car anymore. You need to live in your little district. You can't travel in the name of climate change. All sorts of crazy things. So no, I'm sorry. There is no amount of time that our government could possibly give the federal government to fix these things. It's just not going to happen. The only way forward for a truly free and prosperous Alberta is if Alberta is a nation unto itself. Period. There is no other way. I know that, you know that, a lot of Albertans are on the fence about it. In the last few months, many have jumped off the fence onto the side of Alberta sovereignty and Alberta independence, some more so than others. But there are still people out there who are scared to death of an independent Alberta. You know, business people that have maybe made lots of money in the current situation, people who are comfortable. They don't want anything to change because they're fine right now, right? So there are those people out there. A lot of those people are very powerful and influential. And you bet your last dollar after paying for groceries, if you have a dollar left, that they are squeezing and putting as much pressure on our premier and our government as possible. And, you know, when you've got billions of dollars, I guess you can put a lot of pressure on governments because money buys government change. Isn't that right? There's a few people out there who know exactly what I'm talking about. Now, before I get into what I titled this about, and I titled this live Rule 4, let's make sure that workers get their rights. And in the description, I quoted out of a book called Rules for Radicals by Saul D. Alinsky. The quote goes like this: using your opponent's rulebook against them is The quote goes like this. It's about using your opponent's rule book against them. Rule 4, make the enemy live up to their own book of rules. You can kill them with this, for they can no more obey their rules than the Christian church can live up to Christianity. Now, I will take a moment to point out that that statement is a little bit murky in the last part, because the whole purpose of Christianity is that as human beings, we simply can't live up to anything. And if we're going to join our Father in heaven, we need something to advocate for us, to justify us, and wash us so we can be there. That's the purpose of Christianity, and that we are failing sinners, and we can't do it on our own. So it's not like Christians actually have to live up to it. The idea is God knows we can't live up to it, and he sacrificed his own son for us. So there's my little theology for the evening. So on to it. What am I talking about? Rule 4, using our enemy's rule book against them. Right now, the NDP, with their bedmate, the ATA, the Alberta Teachers Association, has been screaming from the rooftops about rights and freedoms. Our government enacted back to work legislation so that students could get back to school, teachers could get back to work, and parents could get on with their lives. And they had to threaten to use the notwithstanding clause in order to get that done. Now, the reason for this is that a couple of years ago, a union actually challenged back to work legislation in court. I can't remember if it was Supreme Court or Ontario Provincial Court, one of the two, and they won. They said that forcing teachers back to work or unionized employees back to work was unconstitutional because freedom, or the right to strike, is encompassed under the freedom of association, which is a guaranteed freedom under the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Now, I will point out that these rulings actually happened in cases where the government preemptively enacted back to work legislation. The Ford government did it, and the Saskatchewan government did it as well. The Saskatchewan government ended up using the notwithstanding clause in their case. When the Ford government did it, he wouldn't even entertain the idea of doing anything for the unionized employees. He offered them a pittance of $1 per hour raise, and before they could even strike, he passed legislation to prevent them from striking. So in that case, he did take away their right to strike. In our case here in Alberta, our government allowed the strike to go on for way too long. Our government made some offers to the ATA, pardon me, not our government, TIBA, the Teachers Bargaining Association. They made the offer on behalf of the government, and it was tentatively accepted once in September, and then rejected immediately after because the ATA threw something else in they wanted, which was free vaccines, COVID vaccinations for teachers. Not sure why, not sure why they're interested in harming teachers, but anyway, that's what they wanted. Government gave in, said, okay, we'll give you that. They said, no, we want more. Now we want another $2 billion. And the Alberta government said, well, that's not going to happen. Everything we do, every penny we do right now is coming out is debt. And we're not going to spend another $2 billion to do it. Anyway, my point is, our government went back and forth through TIBA and the ATA, negotiating this stuff for a month. The teachers were on strike. They were allowed to strike. Their right to strike under freedom of association was upheld by the Alberta government. And I can imagine the reason that our government allowed that is because our premier, Danielle Smith, did not want to infringe on people's rights. I asked her once, why don't you just do this specific thing? And I think we were talking about the pension plan. Why don't you just do it? You could legislate it tomorrow, and it would be a benefit to Albertans. They would see it by election time, and they would see that you made the right decision. You know what she said? She said, I will not be a tyrant. I do not want to be a tyrant. I do not want to act like the last government. I'm going to ask the people. And if the people, being you guys, want an Alberta pension plan, then we'll do it. So you guys get the referendum, and we'll do a pension plan. But it has to come from you. So I can tell you that she does respect constitutional rights. Now, the NDP have spun this to make it look like our government is the Kenney government, when they literally took away your right to work, to visit your grandmother, to hug your mother, to play with your children outside, to go to a hockey game with your child, to sit in a restaurant, drink coffee. They took away all those rights. And the same people that are screaming from the rooftops about rights and constitution and that right now are the very same ones who chastised, persecuted, and death threatened people like me when I stood up for my rights and your rights during the period of the restrictions, which, by the way, were illegal. Funny how none of those teachers or ATA people talk about that right now, but bygones, right? Anyway, they're talking about rights. And so I put some thought into this, and I thought to myself, why don't we give them exactly what they want? The ATA says they want constitutional rights respected for their teachers. I agree. I absolutely, oh my goodness, I'm going to make a t-shirt. I'm going to design a new t-shirt in the next couple of days. It's going to be for sale, www.whistlestoptruckstop.ca, and it's going to have something to do with these nuts, because these nuts are in the comment section again, and that's one of my favorite sayings. So we're going to get that. Anyhow, oh, man, that's like something shiny in the comments, and I got all distracted. Anyway, let's give the workers their rights. Shall we? Do you think that's a good idea? I think it's a good idea. How do we do that? How do we make sure that the rights of workers are upheld and respected by our current government? I have an idea. Last week, I sent a copy of 2 proposals for bills to be put through the legislature that would accomplish this. I sent copies out to every CA president in the province, so they have them. I sent it out to the premier. I sent it out to some of the premier's staff, some ministers, some MLAs that I know as well. They all have this. It's on their desk. It's in their hand. It's in their inbox. Let's give the workers their rights. Check this out. Now, I debated AI about these for over a week. Of course, I use it to help me draft the format of this because I've never written a bill before. But I think it came out pretty well. So let's talk about it. And the bill number really means nothing. I just picked random numbers. So the first one, an act to separate professional regulation from collective bargaining. As you may know, the ATA is the professional regulating body of teachers to protect you from teachers, or children from teachers. And they're also the union that advocates for the teachers. Now, this is not a good thing. So, whereas the people of Alberta recognize the importance of maintaining both effective professional regulation in the public interest and fair collective bargaining for employees in the labor market, and whereas combining these two functions within a single organization creates an inherent conflict of interest between the duty to protect the public and the duty to advocate for members' employment and compensation interests. And whereas it is desirable to ensure that professional regulation is conducted with independence, transparency, and accountability in the public, while collective bargaining remains a right exercised freely through certified trade unions. Therefore, Her Majesty, that's wrong, it's His Majesty, by and with the advice and consent of the Legislative Assembly of Alberta, enacts as follows. And it goes into a bill that would separate professional associations from collective bargaining unions. Very, very important. I'm going to leave it up there. I don't know if you can read that little writing. You can probably ask your CA office if they can give you a copy of it, or maybe I'll just post it on my website in my blog section. Who knows? So the companion bill to this, making sure workers have their rights. An act to protect workers' freedom of association and choice, as guaranteed in the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Whereas the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms guarantees to everyone the fundamental freedoms of thought, belief, opinion, expression, and association. And whereas the right to freely associate includes the right not to be compelled to join or financially support an association, trade union, or collective organization as a condition of employment or professional status. And whereas in Alberta, certain statutes and professional frameworks compel individuals to join and financially contribute to specific unions or associations as a condition of their employment, professional certification, or licensure. And whereas it is desirable to ensure that all workers and professionals in Alberta enjoy genuine freedom of association and can decide for themselves whether to be registered by a union or not. Therefore, her again. Well done, AI. Therefore, His Majesty, by and with the advice of the consent of the Legislative Assembly of Alberta, enacts as follows. And then it goes into the bill, an act to protect workers' freedom of association and choice. So there's a lot of stuff in there. Oh, I forgot to put the other one up. That's the other one. There's a lot of stuff in there. It is important that labor unions can exist and they can bargain for their employees. I mean, it's nobody's arguing that. But what is a problem is when people are compelled to join any particular association. That is unconstitutional. And that's why, in this case, I'm calling on the Alberta government to give workers their rights. I agree with the Alberta Teachers Association, and I agree with the New Democratic Party of Alberta that workers should have their constitutional rights respected. And for far too long in this province, they haven't. Since the ATA was enacted through statute law in, I think it was in the 30s, I can't remember, workers have not had their constitutional rights upheld. They have had their constitutional rights trampled by the ATA for decades. They have been compelled to join an association that they may or may not have wanted to join. They have been compelled to financially support organizations that may or may not be aligned with their values or their politics. And in turn, it's allowed this organization, the ATA, to grow so powerful that they can actually campaign along with political parties to topple the government. And that's what we're seeing right now. So I want to give the ATA exactly what they want. I want the Alberta government to make sure that the constitutional rights, freedom of association, the right to strike are both upheld, and workers have those. Now, we've already seen the province uphold the right to strike. They did, because they allowed teachers to strike for an entire month. And then they had to balance out that right with the rights of children to get an education, with the rights of parents to have their tax dollars spent wisely, and with the rights of teachers to work, life, liberty, those things, right? So why don't we do it? Why don't we do that? There's no reason. Alberta should be leading the charge in this, because our government and our premier, I know this, believe in protecting our rights. Now, that's not to say they're perfect. They sure bungled up our Bill of Rights, didn't they? That's going to get fixed eventually. It's being looked at right now. But in this case, I think our premier would be well served to listen. Listen to what Albertans are saying. Listen to what they're asking. Listen to what conservatives are asking for. Listen to what the NDP is asking for. Listen to what the ATA and teachers are asking for. And we're really all asking for the same thing. We want our constitutional rights upheld. So let's give that. Let's give that to Albertans. We can accomplish that with these two bills. You have to first separate the professional regulatory body from the union, because yes, I do agree that professionals in certain sectors should be part of a regulatory body, so that the regulatory body can protect the public, us, from them. That's their job. As my friend Roger said, the College of Physicians and Surgeons' job is to make sure that if we go in for surgery, our surgeon is, amputating the correct leg, and that they're not pedophiles and things like that. That's their job. The job isn't to politically mobilize or advocate for specific political parties or anything like that. And once that's done, then we should uphold teachers' and workers' rights to join or not join a union. And I do understand that there will still be unions, of course, and they may bargain with the province to get better working conditions, pay, or things like that for their union members. And I don't ever want to see a two-tier or two-class professional kind of structure in Alberta. So what I've suggested is that the union members that are bargaining would get those benefits. But if the non-union members wished to reap the benefits of the collective bargaining, they could pay a fee to the union, a stipend of some sort, to say, hey, thank you for your work. You did some work. We're obviously going to compensate you for it, because it will do, it will be good for us. And then everybody gets what they want. Nobody's being forced to do anything. You can still collective bargain. You can still have unions, but you have your constitutional rights. which is what the ATA is asking for. So if you agree with me on these two things, write a letter or an email to your MLA, maybe phone the office. When they hang up, make sure they actually hang up. And tell them that you want this. I want this. I believe in constitutional rights. Always have, always will. And this is the way we get it. Questions in the comments section. Let's see here. Mary, speaking French in the comment sections again, I see. Mary asks, whose idea was it to F with Alberta's Bill of Rights? Well, it was actually our idea, a group of Albertans. We wanted a more robust Bill of Rights. We wanted it opened up and changed so that we had rights affirmed in there that we didn't have before. Well, that didn't happen. It got opened up all right, and a couple things were added, and some things were added that we really didn't like, namely the Section 1 type verbiage in there that allows the government to do the same thing they did with the Charter of Rights and Freedoms during the period of the pandemic. So it was Albertans' idea to open it, and the government bungled it up. This was a really contentious spot for a lot of supporters of our government, and it actually lost them some support when they did this. Some of us, me included, we tried screaming from the rooftops and telling everyone in government we knew that this was not a good idea. It wasn't going to go well, and people were going to be pissed. But they, for some reason, decided that this was the best thing to do, and they did it. And it's done, but we're going to change it. And I said before, that is being looked into, and I bet you we see a change in that within 18 months to 2 years. But thank you for the question. Yes, my friend Todd says, unfortunately, Mr. Gray and the Black Hat Group's draft was not adopted. That was a very robust Alberta Bill of Rights. It would have served the people of Alberta well, very well. It would not have served the government very well, which I'm guessing is why the government didn't adopt it in that form. Anyway, we'll just keep pressing on. We'll work on it again, and we'll get it done right eventually. Probably with an independent nation of Alberta's constitution, written by the people, instructing the government what rights they have, rather than the government telling us what rights we have. I should point that out. There are two very distinctly different types of constitutions. There is a constitution, like what we have, written, drafted by the British Parliament and the elite of the nation, that told the people what rights the government was going to give them. That's what we have here in Canada. Then there's another totally different type of constitution, like what they have in the United States, where a group of people said, listen up, government, we're going to allow you to govern us. We are going to allow you, in some cases, the privilege of infringing on our rights for the greater good of society, but this is the way you may do it, and you're not going to do it any other way. Oh, and by the way, if you try and do it differently, we also want you to know that we have the right to a well-regulated militia, and we will defend ourselves against government. Did you know that? The right to a well-regulated militia specifically states that it's to protect the people from government. Isn't that interesting? So that's the differences. Anyway, back to the question stuff. Alice says, I stand with Danielle Smith for sending teachers back to work. Thank you, Alice. I'm sure the Premier appreciates that. I do, on that note, we elected Danielle Smith and the UCP government to do specific things. A lot of them went in there thinking they could just charge in and change a bunch of things and fix everything right away. And just like almost every other politician, they came back a couple months later and were like, holy crap, this isn't as simple or easy as we thought. And they didn't get as much stuff done as we wanted. And a lot of people just completely abandoned ship. I get it. I've been there. There's been times where I've been totally willing to throw our current government aside and just do something new. But then it occurred to me when somebody mentioned a bowl of soup with a blueberry in it. What the government is doing right now is a bowl of soup, It's pretty good soup. They've done some good things. Specifically, Danielle, she has stuck her neck out when very few others would have. Actually, she's the only premier in Canada that bothered to stand up for the rights of kids to be protected from ideologues that would see them sterilized and butchered before they're 18. She's the only premier who's done that. And that took some serious intestinal fortitude to do that. No other premier has done that. They've done some good things. They've done some not bad things, but they've dropped the ball in some cases. But overall, I think things are, it's better than it was. Not necessarily in that all the things that we wanted have happened, but they're trying. And I actually said quite a while ago, when it comes to Alberta independence, a government has to try and fail before the masses will understand the necessity of an independent Alberta. And that's what they're doing. They're trying. They're trying to take as much control back to the province as they can. They're exercising whatever levers they have to negotiate with the federal government. Smith had a list of demands that had to be met by Sunday, which they weren't. We received our budget and Alberta was screwed again. They failed. And what does that tell us? That tells us that nothing is going to change, even if we have a government with a leader who has the balls to go head to head with Ottawa. Even Smith can't change it. And what has she said about changes that we want as Albertans? She's said, Alberta, if you want something, tell us and we will listen. If you want to do this, tell me and we'll listen. She said, do the referendum, petition for a referendum. If you want that, petition for it, bring enough people and we'll do it because we're government and we will listen. But at the same time, she's trying to prevent that because she is, I think she's like I was 2 years ago at an Alberta Prosperity Project meeting when Dr. Modry asked, what type of sovereignty do you want? One of the outcomes was Alberta is stronger. We're managing our wealth and affairs, free of interference with the federal government, remain in confederation. I always put my hand up for that because it's not necessarily independence that I wanted. It's sovereignty. I want Alberta to be sovereign in its decisions so that it doesn't matter what Ottawa wants to do. We just do our thing and we still stay part of the larger team because, I mean, who doesn't love Canadians? Canadians are fantastic, although a lot of them are real dolts right now in that they're not paying attention to what's going on, or maybe they're purposely ignoring it. Other people just wanted plain old independence. They want to be an independent nation of Alberta. And I thought about this and I asked myself, what is it exactly that, why is it that I want to be independent? And it wasn't the nation thing. It was sovereignty. And since then, I've learned that the only way to achieve the sovereignty that Alberta needs is through independence. We cannot get it trying to negotiate with Ottawa. It's impossible. Danielle Smith is actually showing us that right now. And I really believe that she wants to make it work. She wants to make it work in Canada. She really, really does. And the reason I think that is because even though it's very difficult, she's taking rotten tomatoes even from her own team by doing so, knowing that a government must try and must fail before we can be successful in achieving independence. So I believe her in that. And I believe her when she says, if you guys ask for something, if you get the referendum question on the table, I'll respect it. That's what a leader does. Back to the questions. Mo says, I still feel Alberta is divided. I'm worried about our cities, especially Edmonton. 100% we are. Absolutely. We're not just divided in this province or in this country. We're divided as a species. There's gaps in our ideology that are the Grand Canyon. And there is no way to bridge that gap except through a spiritual revival. Plain and simple. We're not, the things that we argue about aren't necessarily just policy. Oftentimes they're they're literally right or wrong. They're good or evil. And we argue about these things. And that's not a policy thing. It's not something a government can change. That's why some of the triggering issues that governments get involved in are so difficult for them to manage, because it's not a policy problem. It's a society problem. These things are things like, well, a few years ago it was gay marriage. Now it's trans rights, abortion stuff, abortion issues, right to practice or pray in public, those types of things. Those aren't anything the government should ever be involved in. It's not policy. That's morals. That's what that is. And when the government dips their fingers in that, it's an unwinnable situation. Yeah. Anyway. Beyond 400 says, how Alberta, D's nuts on your chin? Well, unfortunately, you little soy boy freak, those things, Albertans don't actually classify those as nuts. What you have there are, I actually don't know what it is. It doesn't really matter anyway. Nobody wants any part of you on their chin. But thank you for being here. I appreciate that. And I like the emojis. That's awesome. And that's it for questions. No actual questions. It's just mostly comments. So I'm going to wrap it up. It's 10:30, which is my bedtime, but please talk about these two bills. One, an act to separate professional regulation from collective bargaining. And two, an act to protect workers' freedom of association and choice. Let's give teachers, union workers, the ATA, and Gil McGowan exactly what they want. Let's make sure that workers in Alberta have their constitutional freedom of association respected, upheld, and affirmed by this government. Let's give them the right to choose. And in doing so, I'm sure it will help our NDP advocates in the AFL and the ATA and QP. I'm sure it will help them build their membership, because, of course, everybody that is compelled to join one of those unions that are completely separated from what they believe in, they do it of their own free will right now. So nobody's going to choose not to support the unions, right? Right. Night, everybody. See you later. Meow. Email your MLA tomorrow and tell them that you want this government to uphold the rights of workers in Alberta.